The first time I died, my son wasn't holding my hand. He was holding a pen he was using to sign away the last thing I owned. My house. The house my late husband, Cassian, and I had spent more than 30 years paying off. The house where I raised our only son, Riven. And the house I foolishly believed would always be mine. I lay in a hospital bed, barely able to breathe, while Riven stood near the window with his wife, Seraphine. Neither of them knew I was awake. "She can't come back home like this," Seraphine whispered. Riven sighed. "I know. And that private care facility costs a fortune." "I know, Sarah." There was a short silence. Then Seraphine said the words I would remember even after death. "Once we sell her house, everything will finally be easier." Finally, as though my death was the solution to their financial problems, I wanted to scream, but my body wouldn't move. For 6 years, I had funded their entire lifestyle. I paid their rent when they first got married. Then I helped with their mortgage. I paid their electricity bills when they fell behind. I covered Riven's failed business. I helped pay for their cars. I even paid for holidays, because Seraphine insisted they were emotionally exhausted. Whenever I questioned their spending, Riven always had an explanation. "Mum, we're just going through a rough patch." That rough patch lasted 6 years. Mine lasted until the day I died. Cassian had warned me before he passed away. "Help Riven when he truly needs you, Elowen." Then he squeezed my hand. "But never make him dependent on you." I had laughed. "He's our son." Cassian looked at me seriously. "That's exactly why you need to let him become his own man." I ignored him. After Cassian died, I became even more protective of Riven. He was all I had left. At least, that was what I believed. By the time my health began failing, most of my savings were gone. Seraphine convinced me to let Riven help manage my finances, because she claimed I was becoming forgetful. Then, strange things started happening. Money disappeared. Bills appeared in my name. Documents I didn't remember signing showed up. Whenever I questioned anything, Riven would smile patiently. "Mom, you already approved this." Eventually, he started telling other people I was confused. My own son made people believe I couldn't trust my own memory, but on my final day, I discovered something even worse. Seraphine stepped closer to my hospital bed. "Did the solicitor confirm everything?" Riven nodded. "Mum signed the financial authority months ago." My heart nearly stopped. I remembered signing something Seraphine had told me. It was insurance paperwork. Then Riven lowered his voice. "What about Dad's other account?" Seraphine frowned. "What other account?" "The investment account he left Mum." Silence. Then Seraphine smiled. "We'll find it." That smile, I would never forget it. They weren't simply waiting for me to die. They were searching for everything Cassian had left me. My money, my property, my investments, everything. The heart monitor beside me suddenly began screaming. Riven spun around. "Mum?" My eyes opened. His face went pale. Seraphine stepped backward. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. Riven rushed toward me. "Mom!" For one pathetic second, I still wanted him to hold me, because despite everything he had done, he was still my child. Then the room disappeared, and I died. Or at least I thought I did. Because suddenly, someone was knocking. Elowen! My eyes flew open. Bright sunlight poured through my bedroom curtains. I sat upright. No hospital. No machines. No pain. I stared at my hands. They weren't thin. There were no bruises from needles. I touched my face. Then I looked around. Cassian's photograph was sitting beside my bed. My old emerald curtains hung over the windows. I had replaced those curtains years before I died. My heart started pounding. No. I grabbed my phone. The date appeared on the screen. April 17th. 6 years earlier, I stumbled toward the mirror. The woman staring back at me was younger. Healthy alive, I touched the mirror. This isn't possible. My phone rang. I looked down. Riven. Everything inside me froze. I remembered this day. This was the beginning. Riven was about to tell me his business was struggling. He and Seraphine were supposedly behind on bills. He needed $25,000. Just temporarily. That was the word he used. Temporarily. In my first life, I transferred the money that afternoon. 3 months later, he needed another $15,000, then $10,000, then another emergency. And another helping. Slowly became funding. Funding became expectation, and expectation eventually became entitlement. The phone continued ringing. I stared at Riven's name. Then I did something the old Elowen never would have done. I let it ring. Seconds later, Seraphine called. I laughed. Of course I ignored her too. Then, someone knocked on my front door. Alowan? I froze. I knew that voice. Zephyr Vale, my neighbor. In my first life, Zephyr had warned me several times about Riven and Seraphine. I stopped speaking to him after Seraphine convinced me that Zephyr was interfering because he wanted my money. Eventually, Zephyr moved away. I never saw him again. Now he was standing outside my door. Alive, I opened it. Zephyr smiled. You left your garage open again. I stared at him. His smile slowly faded. Elowen? My eyes filled with tears. He looked genuinely concerned. Hey, what happened? I quickly wiped my face. Nothing. That doesn't look like nothing? I looked at him for another moment. In my first life, I had pushed away someone who had tried to protect me. I wouldn't make that mistake again. Would you like coffee? Zephyr raised an eyebrow. You're inviting me inside? Before I changed my mind. He laughed. Then absolutely. While I made coffee, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Riven Seraphine. Riven again. Finally, a message appeared. Mum, please answer. It's an emergency. I already knew the emergency had a price tag, $25,000. At 10:43, Riven arrived. Seraphine was beside him. She walked inside carrying an expensive handbag, a handbag I had bought her. Mum, Riven said, why aren't you answering your phone? I was busy. Seraphine looked around. Doing what? I slowly turned toward her. Do I need permission to be busy now? Her eyebrows lifted. Riven quickly sat down. Mum, something happened. How much? He froze. What? How much money do you need? Riven exchanged a quick glance with Seraphine there. That tiny look. In my first life, I hadn't noticed it. Now I noticed everything. 25,000, he said quietly. Exactly. Seraphine immediately leaned forward. It's temporary, Elowen. Riven has this incredible business opportunity. What opportunity? She paused. Riven looked at her, another glance. Another clue. A contract, Riven said. With whom? Silence. Seraphine forced a laugh. Does that really matter? Yes. I looked directly at her. Especially when you're asking for $25,000 of my money. Riven leaned forward. Mum, I'll pay you back. Good. I smiled. Then you won't mind signing a legal loan agreement? His expression changed. A what? A contract. I counted on my fingers. Repayment dates, interest, security, and proof of what the money is being used for. Seraphine's smile vanished. Elowen, we're family. Yes. I leaned back, and family shouldn't have a problem being honest with each other. Riven stared at me. He looked genuinely confused. The mother he remembered would already have been reaching for her banking app. But that woman had died. Literally, Seraphine reached across the table. We need the money today. There it was, urgency pressure. Fear, the same weapons they had used against me for years. I looked at her hand, then at her face. No. Riven blinked. What? No? Mum, I'm not giving you $25,000. Seraphine's expression hardened. So you're just going to watch your son struggle? No. I looked at Riven. I'm going to let my son become an adult. He stood abruptly. You know what I'm dealing with. Actually, Riven, I don't. I stood too. I only know whatever version you tell me when you need money. His face turned red. Seraphine stood beside him. You've changed. She said it almost accusingly. If only she knew you're right. I smiled. I have. Riven grabbed his jacket. Fine. He headed toward the door. Seraphine stayed behind. Just for a second, her sweet expression disappeared. And there she was, the woman from my deathbed, cold, calculating, angry. Then the sweetness returned. Money changes people, Elowen. I smiled. You would know. Her face dropped. She followed Riven outside. The moment their car disappeared, I locked the door. My hands started shaking. Then I cried. I hated myself for it. After everything they had done in my first life, part of me still wanted to run outside and call Riven back. He was my son, my only child. But then I remembered the hospital room, the documents, my stolen money, my house being sold while I was dying, and Seraphine saying everything would finally be easier. I wiped my tears. No, not this time. By 1300, I was sitting inside my solicitor's office. Her name was Octavia Wren. In my first life, I had stopped using Octavia after Seraphine convinced me she was too old-fashioned. That had been another mistake. I want to change everything, I told her. Octavia studied me. Everything? My will. I placed my phone on her desk. My financial authorities, banking permissions, beneficiaries, and anything giving Riven access to my finances. Octavia removed her glasses. Has something happened? Something almost happened. She stared at me, but she didn't push. For the next hour, we worked. I changed my will, canceled existing financial permissions, changed my banking security, requested alerts for large transactions. Then I asked Octavia to review every account connected to my name. 20 minutes later, she stopped typing Elowen. Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. What? Have you recently applied for a loan? No. A line of credit? No. Her expression changed. Then we have a serious problem. She turned her computer toward me. An application had been submitted 11 days earlier. It contained my full name, my financial information, details about my house, even my signature. Except I hadn't signed it. My blood went cold. Then I noticed the email address attached to the application. I stopped breathing. No. Octavia looked at me. You recognize it? I did. And suddenly, memories from my first life started rearranging themselves inside my head. Little comments, missing documents, unexpected visits, questions about Cassian's estate. Questions I had once thought were innocent. The email didn't belong to Riven. It didn't belong to Seraphine either. It belonged to someone I had trusted completely. Someone who had stood beside me at Cassian's funeral. Someone who had hugged me while I cried. Someone I had once considered family. Octavia leaned closer. Elowen, who owns that email address? I stared at the screen, my hands slowly curled into fists. And for the first time since waking up 6 years in the past, I realized something terrifying. Maybe Seraphine wasn't the mastermind. Maybe Riven wasn't either. Maybe my son and daughter-in-law had only been pieces on someone else's board. And if that was true, then cutting them off was only the beginning. This time, I wasn't going to die, wondering who destroyed my life. I was going to find them, and when I did, I was going to make sure they remembered the day Alo and Vera stopped being nice. Octavia was still waiting for my answer. Elowen, whose email is it? I stared at the screen. My mouth went dry. Solène Marrow. Octavia frowned. Who is she? My sister-in-law. Cassian's younger sister. The woman who had stood beside me at my husband's funeral and promised, "You'll never be alone while I'm here." In my first life, I believed her. After Cassian died, Solène visited constantly. She brought food, helped with paperwork, asked questions about my finances. At the time, I thought she was protecting me. Now those memories felt completely different. Don't contact her, I told Octavia. Octavia raised an eyebrow. You want to report the application? Not yet. Elowen, someone may have attempted fraud using your identity. I know. I looked at the email again. But if I confront them now, they'll hide everything. Octavia studied me for a moment. You've thought about this. More than she could ever understand. I want copies of everything. She nodded. I'll get them. Before leaving, I asked Octavia to quietly begin protecting my assets. My house would not be transferred, my investments would not be touched, and nobody, not Riven, not Seraphine, not Selene, would receive financial information without my direct approval. When I stepped outside, my phone rang. Riven. I answered this time. Mum, we need to talk. We already did. You embarrassed Seraphine. I almost laughed. Of course that was his concern. By refusing to give you $25,000. You made her feel like some kind of gold digger. I became quiet. In my first life, I would have apologized immediately. Instead, I asked, Riven, what company offered you that contract? Silence. Then he snapped, Why are you interrogating me? Because you asked me to finance it. I don't need this. He hung up. That told me enough. There was no contract. But I made my first mistake shortly afterward. I called Solène. I knew I shouldn't. Octavia had specifically warned me, but anger won. She answered cheerfully. Elowen, I was just thinking about you. Were you? Solène, have you spoken to Riven recently? A tiny pause. Not really. Why? Too quick. Too careful. No reason. Elowen. Her voice softened. Is everything okay? For years, that voice had comforted me. Now it made my skin crawl. Everything is perfect. I ended the call. Immediately, I regretted it. I had warned her, and Solène was intelligent enough to notice. That evening, Zephyr knocked on my door, carrying takeaway. You looked like someone who forgot lunch existed. Despite everything, I smiled. You always were observant. He stopped. Always? I realized my mistake. In this timeline, we barely knew each other. Figure of speech. He looked suspicious, but let it go. We ate together at my kitchen table. For the first time since Cassian died, I found myself laughing with someone. Zephyr was calm, warm. He never pushed me to explain why I seemed different. Before leaving, however, he said something strange. Elowen, be careful around your family. I froze. What makes you say that? I saw Seraphine last week. With whom? Your sister-in-law. My stomach dropped. Solène? He nodded. They were sitting together at a cafe. They looked like they were arguing. In my first life, Seraphine had always claimed she barely knew Solène. Another lie. What were they arguing about? I couldn't hear much. Zephyr thought for a moment. But Seraphine said something about being promised more. Promised more. Those words stayed with me all night. The next morning, I received a message from Riven. If you won't help us, don't expect us to keep coming around. I stared at it, then typed, I understand. His response came immediately. That's it? I smiled. He expected me to panic, to apologize, to send money. Instead, I turned my phone off. By afternoon, I made another decision. I contacted the real estate agent managing the investment property where Riven and Seraphine were living. The property belonged to me. They had lived there rent-free for nearly 2 years. In my first life, they stayed for another 5. Not this time. I gave them formal notice. They had enough time to find somewhere else. But I was done paying for their home. Then I canceled the monthly transfers covering their car and utilities. Nearly $4,000 every month. Gone. That evening, Riven appeared at my door. He wasn't alone. Seraphine stood beside him, and Solène was with them. Interesting. Riven slammed the notice onto my kitchen counter. You're throwing us out? No? I remained seated. I'm asking 2 employed adults to pay for their own housing. Seraphine looked furious. You know we can't afford that. Then perhaps you shouldn't be driving a luxury car. Solène stepped forward. Elowen, this isn't you. I looked at her. That sentence almost made me laugh. She was right. The old me was dead. Solène sat across from me. You're grieving. Maybe you're making emotional decisions. There it was, the beginning, the same language they would later use to convince people I was confused. I leaned forward. Are you suggesting I'm mentally incapable of managing my affairs? Solène's face changed. I never said that. Good, I smiled, because my solicitor confirmed yesterday that I'm perfectly capable. The room went silent. For 1 second, fear flashed across Solène's face. Then it disappeared. That was all I needed. She knew. Riven stood up. You're choosing money over your family. No, Riven. My voice cracked despite everything. I spent years choosing you over myself. I looked at my son, and I won't do it anymore. He stared at me before walking out. Seraphine followed him. Solène stayed behind. At the doorway, she turned. You should be careful, Elowen. I smiled faintly. Is that concern or a threat? Her expression became cold. Then she left. My hands shook after I locked the door. I was changing the future, but so were they. And this time, they knew I was fighting back. An hour later, Octavia called. Elowen, I found something. What? The fraudulent loan application wasn't the first document. My heart began pounding. There are others? Yes. How many? She hesitated. Enough that you need to come in tomorrow. Then she said something that made me sit down. And Elowen? Yes? One of them has Riven's signature. I closed my eyes. I had been hoping my son was only being manipulated, that maybe Seraphine and Solène had used him too. But now there was evidence tying him directly to what happened. My second chance had given me something I never had in my first life. Time. But it was also forcing me to face a truth I had spent years refusing to accept. Maybe my son hadn't simply chosen the wrong woman. Maybe Riven had betrayed me willingly. The next morning, I sat across from Octavia with Riven's signature in front of me. I recognized it immediately. That's his, Octavia nodded. The document authorizes a private company to use your investment property as security. My stomach twisted. What company? She turned the page toward me. Marrow Crest Holdings, Solen's company. Suddenly, everything connected. Did they succeed? No, the application stalled because additional identification was required. Relief rushed through me. In my first life, they must have tried again later, and eventually succeeded. Make copies. Elowen, of everything. I wasn't confronting anyone yet. This time, I wanted the entire truth. When I returned home, Zephyr was repairing his front gate. He noticed me immediately. You look like you've just discovered something terrible. I did. I surprised myself by telling him part of the truth. Not about dying, not about being reborn, just the documents. Zephyr's expression hardened. You need to protect yourself. I am. And stop facing these people alone. I looked at him. Why do you care so much? He went quiet, then smiled sadly. Because Cassian was my friend. I froze. What? He helped me years ago when I nearly lost everything. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd keep an eye on you. My eyes burned. Cassian had protected me even after death. In my first life, I had pushed Zephyr away. This time, I wouldn't. That afternoon, Seraphine called. Her voice was unusually sweet. Elowen, can we meet? Why? I think everything has gotten out of control. I knew it was probably a trap. I went anyway. That was my mistake. We met at a small cafe. Seraphine arrived alone, or so I thought. She sat down and immediately started crying. I don't want money. That almost made me laugh. I want my family back, she continued. Then tell me about Marrow Crest Holdings. Her tears stopped. Just for a second. What? Interesting. I leaned closer. I never said what it was. Her face changed. Elowen, I don't know what you're talking about. Then we're finished here. I stood. She grabbed my wrist. Wait. I pulled away. Then I noticed a man 2 tables behind us, lowering his phone. He had been recording us. Seraphine had deliberately brought me there, hoping I would lose my temper. She wanted evidence that I was unstable. Exactly how it started in my first life. I smiled. Tell your friend he should find a better hiding place. Seraphine went pale. I walked away, but she wasn't finished. By evening, Riven had sent messages to several relatives claiming I was behaving irrationally. Solen called my cousin. Seraphine told people I had suddenly become cruel and paranoid. They were building their story. So I built mine. I forwarded every suspicious financial document to Octavia and instructed her to preserve everything. Then I stopped all remaining payments connected to Riven. His phone, his insurance, the second car, everything. At 21:16, Riven called. What did you do? I stopped paying your bills. You can't just destroy our lives. I became very still. Riven, you're 34 years old. Silence. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding. Did you sign paperwork for Solen? His breathing changed. Mum, yes or no? It's complicated. My heart broke, not because I was surprised, because part of me had still hoped he would say no. She said it was temporary, he finally admitted. And you used my property? I was going to fix everything before you found out. Before I found out. Not before I got hurt. That difference told me everything. I love you, Riven. My voice shook. But from today onward, you will receive nothing from me. Mum, please. No money, no property, no bills, nothing. Then I ended the call. I cried afterward. Revenge felt powerful in my imagination. In reality, cutting off my son hurt more than dying had. The next morning, Octavia called again. This time, her voice was urgent. We found where some of your money went. Solen? Partly. My stomach tightened. What do you mean, partly? There's another person involved. Who? Octavia hesitated. Someone connected to Cassian. I stopped breathing. Then she said the one thing I never expected. Elowen, I don't think your husband died leaving you the full truth about his finances. I stared at Cassian's photograph across the room. For the first time since being reborn, my anger shifted. Because maybe the secret that destroyed my first life hadn't started with my son. Maybe it had started with my husband. I stared at Cassian's photograph for nearly an hour before meeting Octavia. When I arrived, she placed an old folder on her desk. Cassian created a private investment account 18 years ago. The account Riven mentioned before I stopped myself. Before I died. Octavia frowned. Before what? Nothing. Continue. The account still exists. How much? She hesitated. Approximately $900,000. I nearly dropped my coffee. Cassian had left me almost $1 million, and I never knew. Why didn't he tell me? He intended to. Octavia opened another document. But according to these records, Cassian became suspicious that someone was taking money from his business shortly before he died. Solène. Possibly. Then Octavia handed me a handwritten note. I recognized Cassian's handwriting immediately. If anything happens before I resolve this, check the blue ledger. Do not trust signatures alone. My heart pounded. The blue ledger? I knew exactly where it was, or at least where it had been. In my first life, Seraphine had helped me clear Cassian's study after his death. She had thrown away boxes of old business records. At least, she claimed she had. I rushed home. Zephyr saw me entering the garage. Elowen? I need to find something. He helped me search. After nearly an hour, Zephyr pulled an old blue book from behind a cabinet. This? My breath caught. The blue ledger. Inside were years of handwritten payments. Then I saw a name. Solène Marrow. Again. Large amounts, but besides several payments, Cassian had written, "Not authorized." Then Zephyr noticed something. Look at these initials. VA. Who is VA? I whispered. I didn't know, but apparently Cassian had. Before I could investigate further, my phone rang. Riven. I almost ignored him. Then something told me to answer. Mum. His voice sounded different, terrified. What happened? Seraphine left. I froze. What? She emptied our joint account. That surprised even me. How much? Everything. Then his voice cracked, and Solène isn't answering either. Suddenly, I understood. Their alliance was collapsing. Whatever Solène and Seraphine were planning, my refusal to keep supplying money had changed their timeline. Riven whispered, Mom, I think they used me. I closed my eyes. You still signed those documents. I know. For once, he didn't make excuses. I thought we were borrowing against the property and paying it back after the investment worked. You thought you could secretly borrow against my property? Silence. Yes. At least he admitted it. I'm sorry. Those words hurt more than I expected, but sorry didn't erase betrayal. I hope you mean that, Riven. Can I come home? I looked around the house I had nearly lost because of him. No. He went silent. You need to fix your own life now. I ended the call with tears in my eyes. Zephyr quietly placed a cup of tea beside me. You did the right thing. It doesn't feel right. Sometimes it doesn't. Our eyes met. For a moment, there was something warm between us. Something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since Cassian died. Then I looked back at the ledger. I wasn't ready for romance. Not while someone was still trying to steal my life. That night, Octavia called. Elowen, we identified VA. I gripped the phone. Who? Vesper Arden, Cassian's former business partner. I remembered him. Charming, successful. He had even spoken at Cassian's funeral. Where is he now? That's the problem. Octavia became quiet. He's currently the majority investor in Marrowcrest Holdings. My blood ran cold. Solène hadn't created this scheme alone. She had help from someone who knew Cassian's finances better than almost anyone. Then Octavia added one final detail. And according to the ledger, Cassian discovered Vesper was stealing from him 3 weeks before Cassian died. I slowly looked at my husband's photograph. Cassian's death had always been called an accident. For the first time, I wondered if it had been one at all. I barely slept. By morning, I had read Cassian's blue ledger 3 times. Vesper Arden and Solène had been moving money through Cassian's business for years. But one entry bothered me more than the others. 3 weeks before Cassian died, he had written, VA knows I found the second account. Meeting Friday. taking the ledger with me. Cassian died that Friday. My hands went cold. I immediately photographed every page and sent copies to Octavia. Then I placed the original in a bank deposit box. It was the smartest decision I made in my second life. Because that evening, someone broke into my house. Nothing valuable was taken. Not the television, not my jewelry, not the cash in my bedroom drawer. Only Cassian's study had been searched. They wanted the ledger. Zephyr came over while I waited for the police. "You can't stay here alone tonight." "I'll be fine." "Elowen?" The way he looked at me made me stop arguing. That night, I stayed in Zephyr's guest room. Before I went to sleep, he stopped outside the door. "Cassian asked me to protect you." I smiled faintly. "Is that the only reason?" Zephyr hesitated. "No." Neither of us said anything else. We didn't need to. The next morning, Riven appeared. He looked terrible. "Seraphine contacted me." My expression hardened. "What does she want?" "The documents." "What documents?" "Anything Dad left behind?" There it was. I stared at him. "Did you tell her about the ledger?" "No." For once, I believed him. Then, Riven handed me his phone. There were messages between Seraphine and Selene, going back months. One caught my attention. Once Elowen signs, Vesper handles the rest. Another said, "Riven doesn't need to know everything. Keep him focused on the money. My son had betrayed me, but he had also been used. Both things could be true." "I'm sorry, Mum." I looked at him. "I believe you're sorry now because they betrayed you too." He lowered his eyes. That hurt him. Good. He needed the truth. "You want forgiveness?" I asked. He nodded. "Then earn it." For the next 2 days, Riven gave Octavia everything. Messages, bank records, emails, even recordings Seraphine had accidentally backed up to their shared cloud account. And then we found what we needed. A recording between Seraphine and Selene. Seraphine's voice was clear. "You promised once Elowen was declared incapable, the house would be ours." Selene answered, "Vesper wants the investment account first." Then Seraphine asked, "And what happened with Cassian?" There was a long silence. Selene finally replied, "Don't ask questions you don't want answered." That was the clue, the same investment account they had discussed beside my deathbed. The same account Cassian had mentioned in his ledger. Everything connected. Octavia took the evidence to the authorities, but Vesper fought back immediately. His lawyers claimed the messages were misunderstood. Selene denied everything. Seraphine blamed Riven. Then they made their biggest move. They accused me of manipulating my son and fabricating evidence because I was mentally unstable. Exactly what they had done in my first life. Except this time, I was ready. Octavia had arranged an independent assessment weeks earlier. My finances were documented, my communications were preserved, every signature was being examined, and most importantly, the original blue ledger was safe. Then came the twist none of them expected. Vesper's lawyers claimed Cassian's ledger was fake, so Octavia requested forensic testing. The handwriting was confirmed as Cassian's, but investigators found something else. Pressed into one of the final pages was an imprint from a note Cassian had written on the page above it. They recovered part of the message, a date, a meeting place, and 4 words, "Vesper threatened me today." For the first time, Cassian's death investigation was reopened. Selene panicked, and people who panic make mistakes. 3 days later, she tried to leave the country. She didn't make it far. Seraphine immediately began cooperating to protect herself. And Vesper. He kept fighting, but the empire he had built using other people's money was beginning to collapse. One evening, I stood outside my house with Zephyr. "So it's almost finished?" he asked. "Almost." "And Riven?" I looked through the window. My son was inside helping Octavia organize evidence. "He isn't getting my money back." Zephyr smiled. "Good. And he isn't moving back in." "Even better." I laughed. For the first time, setting boundaries didn't feel cruel. It felt peaceful. Then my phone rang. "Octavia. Elowen, we found one final piece of evidence." "What?" Her voice became serious. "Something Cassian left specifically for you." My heart stopped. "What is it?" "A recording. I couldn't speak. Octavia continued. And Elowin. Cassian names the person he believed was responsible if anything happened to him. I looked at Zephyr. After 2 lifetimes of lies, I was finally about to hear the truth from my husband himself. I sat in Octavia's office, staring at the small recording device on her desk. Cassian's voice filled the room. Elowin, if you're hearing this, something has happened to me. My eyes immediately filled with tears. I discovered Vesper has been stealing from the company. Selene has been helping him hide the transfers. I covered my mouth. Then Cassian said something I wasn't expecting. Please don't blame yourself. I should have told you sooner. His voice became quieter. Vesper threatened me today. I've copied everything. The blue ledger contains the transactions, but the investment account contains something even more important. Octavia and I exchanged looks. Cassian continued. Every transfer Vesper made was mirrored in the account records. I created it partly as a safeguard. He doesn't know. That was why they had spent years searching for it. It wasn't just money. It was evidence. Then Cassian said the words that broke me. Elowin, protect yourself. And protect Riven. But don't protect him from the consequences of his own choices. Loving someone doesn't mean paying for every mistake they make. I started crying. Even after death, Cassian was telling me the lesson I had refused to learn. The investigation moved quickly after that. The investment records matched the blue ledger. Vesper could no longer claim Cassian had fabricated anything. Selene eventually admitted she had helped Vesper move money, forge documents, and target my property, but she insisted she had nothing to do with Cassian's death. The investigation revealed Vesper had confronted Cassian on the day he died. Their argument became physical. Cassian fell, and instead of immediately calling for help, Vesper left him there and tried to remove evidence connecting himself to the meeting. For years, everyone believed Cassian's death had simply been a tragic accident. Now, the truth was finally exposed. Vesper faced serious criminal charges. Selene's cooperation reduced some of her consequences, but she still lost almost everything she had built through deception. And Seraphine? She turned on everyone. She blamed Selene. She blamed Vesper. She even blamed Riven. But the messages told the truth. Seraphine had knowingly participated because she believed my property and money would eventually become hers. Her marriage to Riven collapsed. Months later, Riven came to see me. He looked different. No expensive clothes, no luxury car, no confidence built on my bank account. He had found a small apartment and taken a regular job. Mum, he said quietly, I understand if you never trust me again. I looked at my son. I still loved him. That had never disappeared. But love no longer meant surrendering myself. I forgive you, Riven. His eyes filled with tears. But forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the way things were. He nodded. I know. You will support yourself. I will. You will never have access to my finances again. I understand. And whatever inheritance you receive one day will be my decision, not your expectation. He swallowed. Okay. Then he surprised me. I don't want your money anymore. I studied his face. For once, I believed him. Maybe losing everything had finally forced my son to become the man Cassian had wanted him to be. We rebuilt our relationship slowly. Not with money, with boundaries, with honesty, and with consequences. As for me, I sold the investment property Riven and Seraphine had lived in. I didn't give him the money. I traveled. I renovated my own house. I protected Cassian's investments, and I started living like my life belonged to me. Because it did. Zephyr remained beside me through all of it. One evening, almost a year later, we sat together on my back veranda, watching the sunset. You know, he said, Cassian would probably tell me I'm taking too long. I laughed. Taking too long, doing what? Zephyr reached across the table and took my hand. This. For the first time since being reborn, I didn't think about revenge. I didn't think about Seraphine, or Selene, or Vesper. I simply looked at the man beside me and smiled. My first life ended with me alone in a hospital bed while people waited to divide everything I owned. My second life didn't end that way, because I finally understood something. Being kind wasn't my mistake. Loving my son wasn't my mistake. My mistake was believing love required me to have no boundaries. I had spent my first life financing everyone else's happiness while slowly destroying my own. When I was given another chance, I thought I had returned for revenge. But I hadn't. I had returned to learn how to choose myself. And this time, I did. Thank you so much for listening to my story until the very end. If you enjoyed Alohan's Second Chance and want to hear more amazing stories filled with betrayal, secrets, revenge, and unexpected twists, please subscribe to the channel. And I have a question for you. If you were Alohan, would you have forgiven Riven after everything he did? Or would you have cut him out of your life forever? What would you do? Let me know in the comments.